1578. Do you recognize these numbers? Because they're one of the strangest parts of the entirety of Five Nights at Freddy's, hidden inside of one of the most lore-filled games we'd ever gotten. But to be fair, you might not recognize the code. Not only were they incredibly hard to find in the only game they appeared in, but the second time they were referenced in the series is in a now unplayable game. But this code, originally found in Sister Location, might hold the key to finally understanding the beginning of the FNAF timeline. Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. In Sister Location, you can hide under the desk in Circus Control, the room that is supposed to overlook Circus Baby's area. You have to do this to defend yourself from the Biddy Babs, and you can optionally do it the next night to listen to Circus Baby's story, where she tells you about how she was at a party and she was subconsciously counting the amount of kids in the room, and once there was one, she doesn't say she killed it, but she says there was screaming and then silence. And combining that concept with this clip that we see in the 8-bit minigame, and these audio clips we get in between nights,
Daddy, why won't you let me play with her?
it's pretty straightforward to assume that Circus Baby killed Elizabeth Afton in this moment. She was alone with Elizabeth Afton, and her programming took over, forcing her to kidnap her, and in the process, accidentally killing her. William Afton had built Circus Baby for this purpose, but expressly warned Elizabeth Afton not to go near it. And she did anyway because she's a kid and there's a cool new toy. This also likely happened the day before Circus Baby's Pizza World was going to open, because according to this site teaser, the day before was going to open, it was cancelled due to gas leaks, and everything was quickly shipped out of there, which seems like an appropriate reaction if your lead performer killed your daughter. And this is huge lore that we get from going out of our way to visit this under desk area and wait. But that's not the only thing you can hear here. Under that desk and in Circus Control in general, when the power is out, very rarely, you can hear Circus Baby whispering the code 1578. It's never explained, never used in anything in Sister Location. I mean, there's a keypad where when you punch in 1983, you get the FNAF 4 cameras on the monitors. If you punch in 1587, nothing happens. This code is never referenced again, but for some reason, if you go out of your way, Circus Baby herself tells it to you directly. And that's the only time it's ever mentioned in not only Sister Location, but the rest of the playable franchise. But if you notice, I said playable, because to be honest, if that one mention was where this code's relevance ended, I probably wouldn't make this video. Like, there's a lot of weird things in FNAF games that go nowhere, because Scott, as a writer, likes to leave breadcrumbs that at the time don't go anywhere, to hopefully down the line pull on them and call it foreshadowing. It's kind of the main way you tell an ongoing story. I personally think this is what happened with the FNAF 4 box, and that's what Scott was trying to tell us in the interview. Not necessarily that he had a plan and forgot what was in the box, but he made the box to resolve later in the story, never got around to that, and now it's so far gone that it's not relevant anymore. And there's a lot of stuff like this throughout the franchise that isn't super worth mentioning. And if that was where this code ended, I would assume 1578 was just like the FNAF 4 box. There was a plan, nothing really came through with it, and now it's too late to care about. But it is referenced one other time. In a game you cannot play. Five Nights at Freddy's Special Delivery. Special Delivery is a weird game. It's that AR Pokemon Go-like game where animatronics would visit you at your house and you had to do 360s to protect yourself. Genuinely, I thought it was a fun game. My biggest gripe was you can't play the game in public, because to play the game in public, you have to be in a public setting and do this. I'm genuinely dizzy. But regardless of what you think about the game, it's no longer playable. It's off of app stores, the servers aren't supported, and the company that made it, I don't even think they're in business anymore. If you want to play a game like it, there are recreations. Forsaken AR is a fan game that basically rebuilds that game from the ground up. It's currently down, but I believe it's because they're remaking the entire thing in Unity, so keep your eyes out for that. But the reason I'm bringing up Five Nights at Freddy's Special Delivery is because of the custom skins in the game. A way to sell many microtransactions in that game was that there was not only the cast of animatronics we've come to know and love, but custom skins for all of them, ranging from actually terrifying to very silly. Now, some of these skins are references to other things in the game, like the one we're going to talk about right now, 8-Bit Circus Baby. It's a custom skin for Circus Baby that references her 8-bit sprite from the Cupcake minigame. It's a recreation of it, but in several animations of this skin, the numbers 1, 5, 7, and 8 are all over. It's a code important enough to come back years later in this of all games. You know, funnily enough, I went to the character encyclopedia because I remembered 8-Bit Circus Baby has an entry in that book, and I was wondering if they would bring it up at all. It seems fairly relevant, but not only does the character encyclopedia not bring it up, they use a render of the skin that doesn't have the numbers in it. So the only way you can prove that this skin had the numbers in it is looking up gameplay footage, because the game isn't available and it's not in the encyclopedia. This code is basically lost media. So twice now, 1578 has shown up in relation to Circus Baby. So it must mean something. We have very rarely ever gotten the same code twice. But the problem is, there's no way to solve it. People have been trying to solve this code for years, but there's no satisfying answer. So what have people come up with so far? The thing about solving this code is we don't know the question, right? Usually when you have a code, you know what you're trying to solve for. But because we don't have that, we just have a bunch of numbers. It could be 15 kids, 7 souls, 8 locations. Who knows? We cannot possibly understand what that could mean without further context. So, to make a useful conversation, most of the theorizing of this code comes down to a date. After all, with 4 digits, you can make a month, day, year, date, so long as it's before October and before the 10th. So taking the code directly, 1578 would be January 5th, 1978. Is that meaningful in any way? Not really. That year is the year before the Secret of the Mimic takes place, and it theoretically could be like Elizabeth Afton's birthday, but that seems like a weird thing to tell us. And also, if she died early in the timeline, like mid-1980s, she'd be like 8 at the time, and the vocal lines we get of Elizabeth sound arguably younger than that. It's hard to tell. So the question becomes, if we jumble the numbers, what dates can we make out of it? And that is where most of the solving dedicated to this code has gone. What dates can we make out of the code, and are those dates useful? And it turns out with 4 numbers, you can make a lot of date combinations. So when listing out all the combinations, it's most useful to list out the years you can make, because the month and day are arguably immaterial. Doesn't matter if it was January 5th or May 1st, who can really say? But the years are what we're really looking at here, and the years you can make within this code are 1987, 1985, 1981, 1978, 1975, 1971, and then dates from the 50s and the 10s. And look, I'm willing to go far back in time for this timeline, but if somehow the date August 7th, 1915 is relevant to the timeline, we've lost the plot. Now, looking at these years, some of them are very important. I mean, 1987, FNAF 2 and the Bite of 87, 1985 is the likely year for the missing child incident. These are super important, but that's kind of all we've ever been able to glean from it. People have linked the code to the Bite of 87 and the MCI, but there's never been anything conclusive for it. It's like, okay, sure, Circus Baby tells us the date for the MCI. Why would she do that? Some people have also linked it to Elizabeth Afton's death, which is more relevant to Circus Baby, but the question then again becomes why? Why would it be relevant, and or how could we possibly know that January 5th, 1987 is the day Elizabeth Afton died? Well, we might have a good why for a specific date now, because somebody recently sent in a theory to me, and using it, we might be able to solve that why and piece together the rest of the early timeline of Five Nights at Freddy's. Recently, Jeremy sent in a Patreon comment for the Freddy Fazbear Pizza podcast, the podcast I host every week on this very channel, and I didn't actually bring this comment up on the podcast. I wanted to just make a video about it immediately. His comment reads, "In your previous podcast, you were trying to find William's original motive for the MCI, and I think I found a compelling one. After the bite of 83, William makes a promise to put Dave back together. Not necessarily for will care, but just for experimentation so he can see if it will work for himself in the future. William then goes on to open Circus Baby's Pizza World for the fun times, to capture children for experiments. However, on January 7th, 1985, based on the 1578 code from Sister Location and AR, Elizabeth ends up getting captured and killed. William notices Baby's eyes turn from blue to green, and he discovers possession. 5 months later, on June 26, 1985, he performs the MCI to test possession. He stuffs them in the suit, similar to how Elizabeth was stuffed into Circus Baby. However, the police investigation puts him on the run, so he can't see if it worked. Come November 1987, he performs Save Them, confirming possession by seeing the puppet and withered Freddy going after him. TLDR, Baby's possession makes Afton test it in the MCI. And genuinely, that makes a lot of sense. The MCI is one of those things that we usually want like a decent motive for William Afton to have. It helps to place it in the timeline. It would be strange if William Afton just started killing kids for no reason one day. Not to say there's any good reason for William to do that, but there should be some internal motivations for his horrible actions. And many people believe that the MCI was William Afton already experimenting with possession, which makes sense for a motivation, but where he got that idea is the hang-up. It never really felt satisfying. But this gives us a compelling timeline. The bite of 83 happens first. I and many others have been saying the bite of 83 happens first because frankly it makes the most sense. It requires the least amount of prerequisites. The crying child being bit by Fredbear is at most a prank gone wrong. It doesn't need any weird motivations or possession or knowledge of immortality. It's a prank done by Michael Afton to his younger brother that went sour. But then after that, William Afton begins trying to figure out how to put him back together like he promised. This could then lead to the Funtime animatronics, something we just talked about being earlier in the timeline now that we have the context of Secret of the Mimic. Now, in the past, I've said the Funtimes could come before the MCI, but the logic was that he wanted to use animatronics to perform an MCI, and when that proved too dangerous because it killed Circus Baby, he scrapped it and did it himself. Which is admittedly very thin logic. Because one, why does he want to do an MCI in the first place? And two, if his goal was to kill kids in an animatronic suit, Elizabeth dying proved that it worked. So I don't know what the big deal is. Something that I had been forgetting to consider all this time was the way Elizabeth died. She was stuffed into an animatronic suit. If William Afton noticed that she possessed that suit after the fact, then William Afton would have fairly direct evidence that being killed by being crushed into an animatronic suit could lead to possession. And 1 time is a fluke, but 6 times is a fact. Now his own twisted motivations for the missing child incident makes more sense. So all this in mind, what sort of timeline forms at the beginning of Five Nights at Freddy's? After acquiring Murray's Costume Manor in the late 70s, William Afton learns about the Mimic, a recreation of a human as a robot. It fascinates him, the idea that if he could recreate himself, he could be effectively immortal, and he begins spending all of his time in the bunkers that Edwin Murray left, studying this mimic and trying to find ways to achieve this perfect copy. And it's this study that leads him away from his own family, leaving Michael and Dave Afton to take care of themselves. Eventually, Michael Afton's pranks on his younger brother go too far, leading to the freak accident of the bite of 83. Dave Afton dying in the jaws of the Fredbear animatronic. William Afton promises to put him back together, but it's more of a bet with himself. After all, Edwin Murray was able to make the Mimic, which seemingly copied David pretty well. If Edwin could figure this out, so could William. And he spends even more time in that bunker, now making the Funtime animatronics. He's finally able to make robots that mimic things just like Edwin's creation. Maybe now he'll be able to figure out what that secret extra step was. But just before Circus Baby's Pizza World can open up and he can truly start experimenting, Elizabeth Afton gets too close to Circus Baby. And the pre-programmed kidnapping works a little too well, putting Elizabeth Afton inside of Circus Baby and killing her. William Afton scraps the plan. This would all be too public if they just start rampaging. But it's in that moment that he notices Circus Baby's eyes have changed. In fact, they changed to the color of Elizabeth Afton's eyes. Did Elizabeth Afton possess Circus Baby? Were ghosts real? Is the afterlife real? Maybe William Afton wouldn't have to scientifically recreate his mind. If he could force himself to possess a robot replica of himself, what is that if not immortality? Did dying in a robotic suit cause Elizabeth Afton to possess Circus Baby? Well, to find this out, he'd have to replicate this experiment. And lucky for him, there's 5 robots he has full access to, and a restaurant full of children to try again. And that's the theory. And again, the idea that Elizabeth Afton's death is what inspired the idea of stuffing a kid into a suit makes a lot of sense. And before, I'd argue that sister location animatronics this early in the timeline doesn't make much sense, but in a post-Secret of the Mimic world where we know William Afton was looking into this technology really early, everything starts to line up pretty well. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Genuinely, I want to hear your thoughts on this one because I might add it to the full timeline when we get there. In the meantime, if you want to know everything we know about Circus Baby, not just this code, I just did a full video on her and, by extension, Elizabeth Afton right here. All the lore we definitively know and what we've speculated. If you want your fan art featured on the channel, make sure to share with #ToastArt. A huge thank you to my Patreon members who help me do this channel as a living in spite of the fluctuating ad rates of YouTube. And a special shout out to Aiden S., Madison Esmond, Marks, and Sam Pinnell for being our breadwinners this month. And until next time, as always, stay toasty, slices.